Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Grant Carter, and today we're going to talk about emotional control. I'm sure each and every one of you has had a moment that you lost your emotions in an event, whether that's a sporting event where you're on a basketball team, maybe you're shooting a free throw 1-1, and you need to make that first one to get to the second one, and you're down one. That ball probably feels light as a feather. That's definitely an example of losing some emotional control. That adrenaline's going, you really want to win. Another example is maybe getting ready for an exam and you're about to walk into the test, your palms are sweating, you're really nervous, but guess what? You're probably over prepared and you're ready to go. That anxiety still creeps up on you. Another example could be you've got a 5 foot putt left. You've made hundreds of these in your career, but this putt has a little right to left break in it, and there's a leaf that blows through, and you're starting to get a little nervous because this putt could mean the difference between a few $100,000. It's a big deal. It's definitely a big deal, and emotional control creeps into our lives every single day. And how you deal with certain situations really matters. So today we're going to talk about emotional control. I'm going to show you guys a bell curve where the optimum performance is between your performance and how energy and stress can actually impact that. Then we're going to talk about some ways that you can mitigate that stress and mitigate some of that emotion that creeps in and tries to get in your way. We're going to talk about some breathing techniques, and we're going to go through some other techniques that may take a little bit of time to develop, but in the end, it'll be a pretty good way to help you with your emotional control. And then we're going to talk about some examples. And both of those examples are going to be of Tiger Woods in the last PGA Championship. I was really glad that I had this topic to talk about this week after I watched that tournament. There were a few examples of where he either had to get over a bad shot or he had to get over a good shot to walk up to the next tee and hit a drive in the fairway and try to capitalize on the next hole. So there are some really good examples of that, and we're going to get into those later on in the presentation. All right, let's get into managing your emotional control. The bell curve that you see is based off the Yerkes-Dodson law. You have performance as your y-axis and your stress and energy as your x-axis. This shows as your stress increases to a manageable level, so will your performance. As you become overstressed, your performance decreases, and this is where the relaxation techniques are needed. In the low end of the slide, you may become sluggish, lackadaisical. You'll be making errors that you usually don't make. They're just lazy, and you won't be playing with much emotion. As you get to the other end of the spectrum with too much energy, too much stress, that's when you may see players overthrow wide open receivers. They may be missing shots long. They may be throwing the ball out of bounds, trying to make a miraculous play. All of these things, they may be playing too quick. All of these things are they're not controlling their emotion well enough to actually cognitively understand what's going on in the game, and that they just have to play within themselves. If they're easy throws or easy shots and things like that that they've made their entire career. So we use these relaxation techniques to get them back to the middle, get them to where they're comfortable playing, right in that happy medium in the middle of the bell curve. And that's where you're going to see your maximum performance, your optimal performance. But let's get into some of these techniques and see how we can manage our stress. If you have high emotional control, you're able to keep your anxieties in check, and you're much less likely to show your emotions to others. We're going to go over a few techniques. First, we're going to start off with simple techniques to get you started on controlling your emotions. And then we're going to move on to some more difficult techniques that may take some time to master. The first one is a diaphragmatic breathing. Now, diaphragmatic breathing is a quick and simple way to manage anxiety in situations. First, what you want to do is you want to breathe in through your nose. As you breathe in through your nose, you want to feel your lungs fill up and breathing with your diaphragm. An easy way to do this is by placing your hand just below your chest and then down on your stomach. You'll be able to see your hands start to rise and fall. First, you want to see them rise. So by doing this, you breathe in through your nose. Then hold it for about 2 counts. And then breathe out through your mouth. When you breathe out through your mouth, you want to make sure that you expel all, if most, if not all, of the air in your lungs. This slow, methodical breathing technique will help you focus on just your breathing, and it will take away all of the external factors that are happening around you. Repeat this for about 3 to 4 minutes. And as you start to do this, you'll start to see you'll begin to relax. You can slow it down or speed it up, however your pace is. I like to do a 4 count in and a 4 count out. Some people do a 4 count in and a 2 count out and really try to get the air out. It's what works for you. There's different theories on different ways of doing it. But what I go with is same in as same out, and I try to equalize that. That just what helps me focus. Now, what this will do is when you start to get into exercises and different things like that, you can refocus on your exercises. What I've incorporated now is doing this breathing in between sets. So if you're doing CrossFit, if you're getting ready for your whatever event you're doing and you're exhausted, you can start to do these breathing techniques to slow down your heart rate, concentrate on what you're doing, understand where you're at, your surroundings, understand everything that's going on, and kind of recock yourself. It's a great way to do it, and it's pretty simple once you start your methodology on it. The next way that we're going to go through is through expressive suppression. So expressive suppression is exactly the way it sounds. You're suppressing your emotions. So it involves the inhibiting of ongoing emotional expressive behavior. If things are going bad, if things are going good even, you suppress those emotions. Why this is not as difficult as some of the other things that we're going to go through is it's in response to an emotion. So it's after you're already feeling this emotion, you suppress it. So the one example in one of the studies is a person is holding a royal flush, and they see it, and they want to keep their poker face so they don't show anybody else. That's an example of expressive suppression. So this is going to modify your response of how you're actually feeling. The bad part about expressive suppression is if you are suppressing a lot of negative emotions throughout an event, eventually it's going to really start to take a toll cognitively on you. You're going to really start focusing on your emotions, and you're not going to focus on what's going on around you. So if there's an emotion, a positive emotion that you need to suppress, that's okay. If there's negative emotions that you want to suppress, and there's not going to be too many, that this is an okay method to use. A great example of this is at the end of the game. You've been up the entire time, and you finally go down 1 with 3 seconds left in a basketball game. You want to be able to suppress that emotion so the other team doesn't feed off of that. And that went into something we talked about 2 weeks ago with body language too. You want to kind of suppress that too, not to give the other team an added advantage. So suppressing that emotion there is okay. You want to move on to the next play. But eventually, if you end up losing a game, when you get into a locker room, something like that, you definitely want to let whatever those emotions are go in a respectful manner. Now, maybe you need to be alone to express these emotions, but keeping everything suppressed for a long time will definitely start to have an effect on you cognitively. So you want to be able to get rid of those emotions. The next one's cognitive reappraisal. I really like cognitive reappraisal, and I think a lot of people have been using it without even knowing it. So what cognitive reappraisal is it's the cognitive change that involves construing the potentially emotion eliciting situation in a way that changes the emotional impact. It's basically reframing. So you see something negative happen, and you completely reframe it to turn it into a positive. For instance, the same one that we just used. You go down 1 with 3 seconds to go. Reframe that and say it's all right. We have the best out of bounds play that hasn't been stopped all year. They probably haven't prepared for it. We're easily going to get a 2-point shot at the buzzer. We're going to win. You reframe what's actually happening to turn it into a positive emotion before it becomes a negative emotion. Why this is different is this happens early on. This is before your emotion even takes over. So you intervene instead of react. That's why this one's a little bit more difficult, but it definitely takes practice. So when you're in practice, when you're uh, in an environment where it's not that stressful, you can start to develop this skill. But it will take time, and you won't master it right away. But this can definitely reduce the negative emotions in your performance. The final one that I want to talk about is normalization. Now, this was in a study by Clifton Scott and Karen Myers on the socialization of emotion and learning emotion management at a fire station. And I thought that this really hit home to me as a military officer. You know, this could definitely be applied to the organizations that I'm in. Now, the goal of normalization is to create emotional responses in an individual that are culturally acceptable in that organization. They may be odd in other places, but they want to take the emotion out because of your status. So this usually happens in high stress professions that deal with emotional situations on a daily basis. We look at this in hospitals, in the military, um, in emergency response, things like that, police officers, firemen, and it's hard to go through this process because you actually have to start. But once someone goes through the process, they will be able to temporarily reduce their emotions to accomplish their job, mission, things like that. And one of the best ways to normalize through is through experience. You have to experience those things because they're stimuli that a real life situation you will not be able to replicate that anywhere else. You can watch videos, you can train, you can do this, and you can go through some pretty traumatic training, but to actually get through that and normalize and understand your situation and try to take emotion out of that is extremely difficult to do without experience. But that's why normalization, I feel, takes some of the longest amount of time because it's the most in depth, and you really have to understand your cultural surroundings and understand all the variety of experiences that you can have within normalization. So this is a great technique. Um, this doesn't only apply to high stress organizations. You also see this in sports. So again, I'll give you another basketball example. A senior is much better at handling a high stress situation in front of 16,000 fans than a freshman is. I would much rather see a senior on the free throw line down one, shooting a 1-and-1, than I would a freshman. They just haven't had the experience to understand how to control their emotions in that situation. Granted, the players coming up now, the freshmen coming up now, are much better than when I used to play. But it's still that experience, and again, I think that that is one of the best ways to kind of get through your emotions. Now it's time to talk about one of my favorite golfers of all time, Tiger Woods. Now, a lot of people have their opinions on him, but it's hard to dispute the fact that he's one of the best golfers to play of all time. What I want to focus on today is how he gets over his emotions on the course. Now, there's two examples in the last PGA Championship that stuck out to me. The first was on the 17th hole. Now, on the 17th hole, he had an opportunity to go into that and birdie or even eagle that hole and get one shot or two shots closer to the leader at the time, Brooks Koepka. He came off two pars and was looking pretty strong. He knew that the 17th hole was very important for him and that it was definitely a birdie opportunity as he birdied it early on in the week. On the tee box, he hit an awful shot that drew right into the hazard. Now the hazard, it was on the side, so he was able to save that shot and then save par. But that lost opportunity could have had a huge emotional impact on him for the 18th hole, where he's still not out of the tournament. He stepped up to the 18th hole and hit one of the best drives that he hit all day. He then stepped up to his second shot and hit one of the best second shots he had all day, and ended up ultimately making a birdie putt on the 18th hole. To move on from the lost opportunity on the 17th hole to then going to a difficult 18th hole and birdieing that and finishing off his round speaks volumes about his emotional control. And we talked about normalization on the last slide, and this is where normalization comes into play. He's been in these situations multiple times. He knows that he has to move on to his next shot and that there's still a lot of swings that he has left. After that shot on 17 on the tee, he had about 9 shots left in the tournament that he still had to step up and hit. So you have to move on from that. And he was very good at maintaining his emotions. He didn't let the last shot affect his next shot. Now let's talk about the other one. Now the other instance was on the 8th and 9th holes. And he had to move on from positive to continue and hit good shots. On the 8th and 9th holes of the PGA Championship, he birdied both of them. Then he had to move on to the back 9, where he struggled all week. And he struggled on especially 10 and 11. He came up, he stepped up, and he hit great shots on 10 and 11 and ended up parring both of them. So he was on an emotional high when he left the 8th and the 9th holes. And he was able to bring himself back and step up on the tee box and hit another shot. What I ask you to do is, even if you're not a golf fan, watch some of Tiger Woods. Watch the way that he carries himself through the tournaments, especially if he's in contention. There's a look about him. There's the way that he carries himself that is extremely impressive. Sometimes he does show emotion, but then he's able to move past that. He's able to use the reappraisal methods, probably some suppression, but he's able to get it out. He's able to move on. And a lot of that, I believe, also has to do with the normalization that he uses. He's been in these situations before, and he knows how to conduct himself. So I ask you to watch and take some notes, because I think he does a wonderful job. But today we talked about quite a few things about emotional control. We talked about maintaining emotional control, and I showed that to you on a bell curve, where the ends are not the best place to be. You don't want to be too stressed out or not stressed out enough. You want to be right in the middle to have the best performance you can. We also talked about some of the techniques. Talked about diaphragmatic breathing, expressive suppression, cognitive reappraisal, and normalization. Each one is a little different flavor, and some take a little bit longer. So I hope you got something out of today, and I hope to hear from you guys again. Have a great day.